I'm author CJ Peterson. It's my co-host, author Michael Scott Clifton. Hey, I'm pointing in the right direction today. Thank you for joining us today on Book World: A Great Escape. We missed last week. We had some stuff come up, so we're here this week, and we're going to be talking anthologies. Next week, we're going to be talking about the elements or relevance, and at the end, I'll explain exactly what that means. So, Mike, how was your 2 weeks?
Well, it's been kind of a whirlwind. We missed Book World last week because we met some friends that we had from college, and we hadn't seen them in almost 30 years. And they're actually thinking about moving back to Texas, so we met them in Tyler, and it was it was so great to see him again. And then we had Dalton Days Saturday in downtown Longview. The weather was perfect. Seems like Dalton Days weather is always perfect. Don't mean to jinx them, but it was an awesome experience. I actually had a booth next to Patty Wiseman, a fellow author that we've interviewed here on Book World. And Thursday we have the Longview Art Walk in downtown Longview. We are our usual place, which is inside the Vera Bank lobby on Fredonia Street in downtown Longview. Weather doesn't look like it's going to cooperate with the outside, but we'll see. So that's why we always try to get an inside booth. And also, I didn't tell you this yet, but I'll be on the Indie Author podcast or radio podcast. I think you've been on that before with Ben Weeks. And
they're awesome guys. Love them.
Yeah. And so I'm going to be on that. I believe it's Wednesday, May the 24th at 7 o'clock, and looking forward to that. And finally, this coming Monday, I'm going to be speaking to the East Texas Writers Guild in Tyler, and We're going to kind of go over publishing, but particularly, as we talked on 2 separate podcasts that we did here, be very careful with Vanity Press and what to look for when it comes to people that are claim to be publishers, but really just trying to separate you out of your money. So anyway, looking forward to that. That's going to be Monday, I believe it's 6:30 p.m. So I think it's in the chamber office, one of the chamber downtown in Tyler. It's going to be in one of the rooms there. Not quite sure. I'll post it on my website in case you happen to be Tyler and you want to come hear that. I'll be glad for you to come, and hopefully I'll be able to elucidate them a little bit about some of the things we've talked about if they missed our podcasts, both of them.
Well, this weekend I was with Magic Making Mischief and Mom Birella at the Pop Culture Power Show in Stafford, Texas. That was a blast. It's like every 80s kid's dream, like everything you could think of. The Care Bears, there were G.I. Joe, voice actors from G.I. Joe. There were artists galore. There was Star Wars. There was Star Trek. There were Pops. There were, literally everything an 80s kid's head would explode. The only things I didn't find were Garbage Pail Kids. I did find, what was Gizmo? The Gremlins. We found Gremlins. We found like pretty much everything. It was like total 80s nostalgia. Loved it. Then we have on the 15th, I'm going to be, which is not this weekend, but the next weekend, going to the Chautauqua Festival at the Longview Public Library. Just be aware that's usually a very windy weekend that I do outside. But it's always a blast, always a hit. If you love books, you got to come down there because it's not just books. They have different shows and stuff. There's artists. So you got to come check that out. That's at Longview Public Library on the 15th of August. That's going to be from 10 to 3. And then on the 29th of Texas Writers Organization Spring Conference, I'll be talking about podcasts and kind of giving a little update on Texas Sisters Press. You can definitely check that out for sure. That's going to be at the Northeast Texas Community College. Mike, how can people find information on that if they want to come?
Well, they can go to the Netwo website, which you can just Google it. I believe it's www.netwo.org, and it'll have all of the information on there. So, and all the information. And just now that you mentioned NetWo, if I can put a plug in here,
Definitely.
our deadline, we have a first chapter contest, and it's open to anyone, whether you are an experienced author or just starting out. And our first chapter contest is exactly that. It's first chapter. It consists of a synopsis, and it consists of the first chapter of the book that someone is a writer, an author is writing. And the only rules that apply to it is that it cannot be a published work. This must be something that's not been published yet. And that information is also on the NetWo website. I believe it's $10 to enter into the contest. There are cash prizes for first, second, third, and even honorable mentions. So if you are interested in, and the other good thing about the first chapter contest, and what I like in the way that NetWo does it, is that the judges do give you a rubric, which is basically a critique sheet in which they critique all the elements that are listed, but they also give you feedback on your writing, your first chapter, your synopsis. So not only do you
have to be a member to enter that?
You don't have to be a member. You can. We've had people enter from all over the United States.
And they're going to be announcing that on the 29th of April, correct?
And at the NetWo Spring Conference, we will be announcing the winners. And again, it's only $10. Cash prizes, I think, start at $50 and up. So it's a great opportunity. And even if you don't win, as I said, you do get feedback from the judges as to your piece of work, which to me is pretty valuable, because, and it's not just the bad things or the cons. They also tell you the good things that you've done. So if you've not entered, there's still time. The deadline is April 10th. I'm sorry, April 9th.
Next, Sunday.
Sunday at midnight. This coming Sunday at midnight, April 9th, is the deadline to enter into the NetWo first chapter contest.
Awesome. We're also going to be at Kilgore Geekend in Kilgore, Texas on May 6th and 7th. I will be in one of the indoor spots. I tend to not like to be outdoors. Me and outdoors don't get along very well, and neither do they get along with my books. So it kind of messes with the pages of the books. So I try to keep those as pristine as possible. So all that information is on my website, cjpetersonwrites.com, under the appearances page. So now I know we're a little further into the podcast than normal, but we've had a lot we had to announce. We're going to be talking anthologies today. So Mike, when it comes to an anthology, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Short stories, collection of short stories. And so collection of short stories. And if you've been writing for any length of time, I think a lot of authors have been part of a collaboration of short stories. I know you have, CJ, with Texas authors, as I have, and also Beyond the Sea, the underground authors. They're what I liked about the way the underground authors did it is that and you could probably elaborate on this a little bit more, but we had the theme. Had the theme, the boat. If you can see the picture, go ahead. You see the picture of the boat, okay? That was what the authors were given. This must have some mention of the boat and the scene there. And so basically your theme was taken from that picture. You could write about anything you wanted to, but it had to be centered around or include that beach scene with the boat. So it was fun.
Traditionally, anthologies have some sort of theme base to them, whether it's a series anthology, whether it's your own set of anthology or short stories, whether it's an anthology like the group with the underground authors. Like we said, these were short stories, and all we had to have was had to mention the boat. And so the beauty of something like the Beyond the Sea with the underground authors is that you have such an eclectic mix of authors and genres that the perspectives of each of them, because I've actually read all of the stories, they're very unique, and they're definitely shine a light on the authors and their style. And that's the beauty of it. And I read each one because I made an individual cover for each one. So inside on these, there's an individual cover for each one of the things. For example, mine is Making Waves. And so each one has an individual cover to it. Yours, trying to find it. That's, who's this? C.W. Hawes, you're before Hawes. Is yours red? Yeah. Yours is this one.
Yep. Yeah.
So I like the way that was done, where you had to like pick, you know, some sort of a story that had to do that, and each one has a different genre to it. You know, they don't always do that. Sometimes it's actually per the genre itself. For example, for Texas Sisters Press, our holiday anthologies, what we do is it has to be family friendly, holiday themed. So what I do with these is, again, it's the same thing as the underground authors. You have different authors of different genres that put together their stories. Sometimes you will have them per the genre. I've seen one where they're specifically targeting like the Old West and that particular time frame. Sometimes it's the Old West and holidays. Sometimes, you know, it just depends on how they want to do it. The underground authors is currently doing a anthology series where each author is writing an actual book, and the central theme is this town called Magnolia Bluff. And you know, there's a central little nugget that goes with each of them, where everybody always dies on this specific date in May. I think it's like May 21st or something like that. But again, each author is bringing in a different genre. And what I do, for example, with my anthologies for Texas Sisters Press, because they're all holiday themed, I'm going to be collecting them, and I'm going to be putting them in their own anthology book at some point down the road. And what I've done with those is, for example, with Chain Reaction was a book that I launched last year. It had to do with time travel. So the story in the holiday anthology for this year was, who said that? What I did for the holiday thing this year was I sent them back to 1651 Ireland. And so they went back in time. So I connected it to the stories, and I did that for each one of the anthologies. They do connect to some series of mine. I think it's a Savvy Loy that said she's doing her first ever, and it's any genre Little Red Riding Hood adaptations, which is kind of a unique. Again, it's the theme. You can go steampunk with that. You can go horror. You can go all sorts of interesting spins on it. And I love that. But sometimes, like I said, sometimes even writing a short story gets you out of a rut. You know,
Right.
if you're in a rut or you're stuck, you know, write a short story. A short story is literally like 3,500 to 7,500 words. And so, you know, it challenges you to put an entire story line into a shorter version, but it gets those creative juices flowing because you have to say more with less.
I think, you know, which of course anthologies are short stories. But they can, as you've already pointed out, they can, unless there's a common theme. For example, with, I think the other anthologies or short stories both you and I have written, they had them by genre. In other words, historical fiction short story, cozy mystery short story, you know, science fiction short story, and they had specific categories, you know. But I do like the anthologies like the ones that you've described and Beyond the Sea, because while you have a central object, theme, picture, your imagination can take you wherever you want to go, make whatever story you want to make out of it. It doesn't have to follow some certain parameter other than, you know, a location or an image. But short stories, I personally don't like to write short stories. I have written a number. I've won awards for short stories, but I'm not a fan of short stories. However, from a writer's standpoint, particularly if you are just getting into writing, or even if you've been a writer for a long time, short stories force you to be a better writer, because what you're doing is you're actually telling a story in a much smaller context in terms of the number of pages and the word count. And it forces the author to get to parse their words, but at the same time, get more bang for their buck, so to speak, on the words that they do use. It makes you a more efficient author. I think it makes your writing better. And it's good to jump into the short stories and do anthologies from time to time, because I do think it helps to sharpen your skills as a writer.
Well, and the beauty of short stories is if you're doing a compilation, for example, this, or what Savvy Loy is doing, which she mentioned with the Red Riding Hood. The beauty of it is you have several different authors that are in it. Usually between 5 and 10, or 5 and 12, usually maxed. And with that, each author is promoting that particular book. So you're getting a lot of cross promotional opportunities. That's the brilliance of something like that, or of like the series anthology, is each one of the authors is sending that out to their network as well. So you're getting exposure between not just your network, but everybody else's network. And so that brings in, a brilliant advertising opportunity.
I was looking at, because anthologies can cover a wider area than just a compilation of short stories around a central theme or in certain genre categories. A very famous anthology that is, I think it's on Netflix now, is it Amazon Prime, is The Witcher by it's hard to pronounce, Andrzej Sapkowski. Yep. And actually, The Witcher is a anthology. It is a series of stories which range in size. I would call them novellas to short. They range from short story to novella, and they're really and if you've never read The Witcher, it will kind of, if all you saw was the Netflix series, you would be quite surprised to know that there are very few novels concerning that. The Witcher, they're novellas or short stories, compilations. And in fact, some of the books that I've read, actually, CJ, they are exactly what you have described on the compilation. That's what they are. They're a compilation of these novellas and short stories. So an author can actually write an anthology. And I know it doesn't necessarily, it can be a science fiction themed anthology. It can be a fantasy. It can be historical fiction. And it can be a series of stories that you sell that don't necessarily follow, the path that you normally would of a 50,000 and upward manuscript. So I thought that was pretty interesting about The Witcher.
Well, it's almost like those Reader's Digest books that we used to get back in the 80s and 90s, where it's like, where they don't match. They're just there. But I like the idea of what you're talking about with The Witcher, because you can have a central character with a bunch of little stories, and it's almost like writing your own TV series.
I mean, so it apparently it sells. I mean,
it's nice because you could take them in short bites. In this ADD society, that's actually brilliant. So that gives me a lot of good ideas. My author brain is currently working on. As soon as I take these ideas that we come up with and just run with them,
if you have, like you're saying, if you already have an established character, and you already have kind of an established world or environment, why not use it that way? There's no reason not to, right? You don't necessarily have to write a novel.
Sometimes people put like these little 99-cent novellas out. Well, shoot, make it an anthology. I mean, you might not get as much because sometimes those are like 99 cents a piece, and you can get the anthology for like $2.99, but you're still getting the word out and you're still getting it out. And it's kind of brilliant because basically if someone's not like a heavy reader, they can read like a story a night. And they've gotten the very beginning, middle, and end of an entire story in literally one sitting.
Well, it's a good point there, because the society we live in nowadays is very fast moving, very fast paced. And especially among younger people, who are more familiar with acronyms than they are the full word. And and I've heard this before at book events and stuff like that. Well, I just don't have time. A lot of times people who don't read books, who alternately listen to audiobooks, that's the reason they give. I just don't have time to read, a full novel. But short stories, anthologies such as, Beyond the Sea or your Christmas anthologies, you can read those in short bites and not have to spend an inordinate amount of time reading them. So, that's actually it's
Yeah.
probably a niche market there that's not been exploited.
That's why I said the author brain in me is going. Mommy says Reader's Digest is a good comparison. I used to think anthology meant chronicles of a specific character or place. It's kind of like the Chicken Soup for the Soul. You remember those
Okay.
books?
Yeah.
Those books sold a lot, and they were a bunch of short stories. And they didn't always connect. They were just usually heartwarming stories. And so you can take these. So, for example, my chain reaction characters, they're already an established character. I could take them on other adventures and make it an anthology. There's a lot of things you can do. Time travel is a great option. There's so much to pull from. There's a lot of choices and places and things that you can do with an anthology that isn't like a complete and utter story. And like I said, you can kind of just take it a little bit at a time. You can do your own, or you can do it with a group of people.
I just thought of just another example. World War Z, which is about zombies, and it was made into a movie with what's the actor? He's a heartthrob.
It's either Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise. Usually
Brad Pitt. Okay. World War Z is, if you've was written by Max Brooks, which came as a total shock to me because Max Brooks is the son of Mel Brooks,
really,
aka Blazing Saddles.
totally off
yes,
color.
yes. Now, you would never have thought in a million years that Max Brooks would have written a book like World War Z, but actually, World War Z was an anthology. It was a series of short stories which followed the zombie theme and how things came to be. But the movie, which had Brad Pitt in it, was not. It was completely divorced from the book in the sense that while it followed the theme of zombie apocalypse, it was a movie that looked like it was seamless from start to finish, when in actuality the book upon which it was based was short stories, one right after another. The reason I know that is because I saw the movie, which I do this from time to time. I liked it, didn't know there was a book, saw in the credits that there was a book. So I went back and I read the book by Max Brooks. And to my surprise, much like when I read The Witcher, after seeing the series, it wasn't a novel. It was a series of short stories. And it was actually, I would recommend it because it kept I'm not really big on short stories, but these books actually were very well written and they kept my interest.
Yeah, there's collections of them. Interesting. I'm currently on Amazon. That's interesting. I did not know that. And there's like a collection of 8 books for The Witcher.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. So if you had any advice to give to someone who's, and it's also a great way to jump into, before we jump into that one, it's a great way to jump into the author world. I know at Texas Sisters Press, the holiday anthologies, each one of these anthologies that we've done for 2020, 2021, and 2022 have all had a brand new author all the way through USA Today best-selling authors in them. And so when you can get within that group, it gives you experience. It allows you to be a published author. It gives you that confidence of knowing, you know what, I actually am a published author. And you can kind of go off of that.
Well, I think if you're just starting out, or again, if you're an author that is published, but you've kind of reached, I won't call it writer's block, but it seems like the creative juices maybe aren't flowing as good as they used to. Short stories and anthologies are a good way to if you're a beginning writer, as I stated earlier, to hone your skills as a writer. It forces you to parse your words and to get more out of the words you do use, which helps to make later a more effective novel. Because the worst mistake an author could make is for his readers to become bored reading their books. And short stories are a way to kind of avoid that because, again, you have to be sharp. You have to be, you have to use much fewer words to tell a much larger story, if you want to call it that. And for authors that have never done this before, and I include myself in that, and of course, you have several anthologies yourself, CJ, so I know you can well relate to this. It does help you even as an experienced author because, again, it doesn't hurt to write shorter stories as part of an anthology that interest people because it's still a story. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not as long as a novel.
Well, and the beauty is you have to challenge yourself to do the setting, the character development, and the actual storyline all within 3,500 to 7,500 words. So when you take some of those stories, for example, the Tested by Fire that's coming out this year, that story, there's a short story that's connected to that in the 2020 anthology for Texas Sisters Press, the holiday anthology. And so I started with this little short story, and it's now going to be a book, a couple years later. So it can help you develop those characters, give a little backstory enough that you can bounce it forward.
Okay.
For
So my
2021, I used one of the characters from the Sands of Time trilogy, Ben, and how he got his adopted sister. And she actually is mentioned in the trilogy. So it can help you set up for a down the road book too.
Yeah, my light bulb just went on. I was and listening to what you're saying and you're exactly right, CJ. A short story can be the launch pad for a book,
Or
as
series.
you were saying, a series.
Mm-hmm.
You know the characters, you know the setting, but a short story can actually set the foundation for a later book or series.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there's a lot of examples out there of that happening. And I don't know why it just like I said, the light bulb just came on, but I've had you've written books and are fixing to have future books based on that. I've got one in mind myself, and it never dawned on me until we started talking about it right now that is another huge advantage of writing a short story. It gives you the idea and the foundation for a later book or series. Very good.
Yeah.
I'm
Well, and
glad
the
you mentioned that.
other thing, when I went to write the first story for the 2020 anthology, it turned out to be too long because basically that story was connected to my Team Angel series, which is like 13 books. And so, of course, it was a little bit longer than the ones that were 1 and 3 books. And so what I did was I kept the novella, and then I used the next year's anthology, and I made a short little novella with a bonus story. And so I like the short stories because they're almost like an author business card. You can also use them for signups for your newsletter. Hey, sign up, you get this free short story. So there's a lot of tons and tons of applications and uses for these books and for the short stories. And like I said, you can like later down the road when I get 5 or 10 of these short stories, I'm going to have my own holiday anthology. And I'm going to put all my
Well,
short stories together and I will just refer them back to the book or the series that they're connected to.
and you'll have a book of short stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. The other thing I thought of that we talked about a little bit is that again, if you're starting out as a beginning writer, beginning author, entering short story contests can be a way to get recognition and to win some awards, which you can, brag about yourself and gives you sort of gravitas that you can advertise when you do start writing a full-fledged novel or book. So it's a good way to get the foot in the door. And like I said, start to gain a reputation as a writer.
Definitely. So we've run out of time for today, but definitely short stories, anthologies, great myriad of applications that we've talked about today. For next week, we're going to be doing elements of relevance. And what that means, we're going to talk about hot and cold topics, minorities, extraneous storyline factors, the intent of the storyline, etc. So it's kind of going to be like the elements of relevance regarding Mombi has a question. I'll answer in a second. Regarding writing a story itself? Are you going to stick with the phases? What are you going to do? Mommy asked, can an anthology be all one author or should it be multiple? It can be both. You can have one, like I said, I'm going to have one eventually of my own. I've been in some with all. The benefits can come both directions, because if they're all yours, you're not waiting on somebody else to get their storyline in, and you're not hoping and praying that it's fully edited and ready to go. But you have the benefit of multiple networks. You have the benefit of collaborating and getting ideas and bouncing ideas off of other authors. When it's on your own, you don't have to worry about a lot of that. And you generally have a lot of it together. And like I said, I've already got them going and marinating in my brain. She did say, please just take them on more adventures, great characters, referring to the Chain Reaction group. And so that may be a thing. They can go both directions. It just depends on what you're looking for, or do both. I'm one of those multi-genre people, so I'm all for sending it all out. Getting your name out. It's content, content, content. That's the beauty of anthologies. So next week, 1 o'clock, same time, same sandbox you found us in. We'll catch you then. In the meantime, have a good week. Bye.
See ya.